Hey Cameron, it's Wednesday, and well, it's not. It's actually Thursday, and I'm sorry for that. It's time for Bible study. My phone died on me yesterday, and I couldn't get the Bible study recorded, so we're a day late, and I'm sorry about that. So it's Thursday for Bible study this week. But for Bible study this week, I've been thinking a lot about home recently. And in my home church, we're very proud of the windows, the stained glass windows in my home church. And to the best of our estimation, and I've done a little research, we believe that those two have been original Louis Tiffany stained glass. We're very proud of them, kind of the pride of the city of Aberdeen. And there are three. The main window, which is sort of directly across from the pulpit. We have a wonderfully unique sanctuary. It's one of those that's kind of in a round, like kind of a fan-shaped sanctuary. And the main window is a big 25 or 30 foot beautiful window of the ascension of Jesus. And it's just beautiful. And when you stand in the pulpit, you're looking directly at the Lord rising above the fields, and they have these beautiful Easter lilies at his feet, and he's ascending to the throne, to the Father. Then over on the side, they have two windows, and that one is the Nativity, of course, the Christmas story. But the other window, which I have always found interesting, it's the story, probably, of maybe Jesus and Mary and Martha. Maybe it's Mary washing his feet, but I think it's Mary and Martha. And that's an interesting story. So I thought we might take a look at that story. It only appears one place in the gospel. The story of Mary and Martha is in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, starting about verse 38. Now this comes directly after the story of the Good Samaritan. Directly. And so it says, verse 38, let's look to the text. Now as they were traveling along, he entered a certain village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister called Mary, who moreover was listening to the Lord's word, seated at his feet. But Martha was distracted with all her preparations, and she came up to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me alone to do all the serving? And he then tell her to help me. But the Lord answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and bothered about so many things, but only a few things are necessary. Really only one. For Mary has chosen the good part, which shall not be taken away from her. That's it's a famous story, but it only appears this once. And so it has a big impact. And I think it has an impact because I think it bothers us a little bit, this story. My mother used to say, kind of get under her skin, my mom used to say that she always thought Martha got a bad rap. She always thought Martha really didn't need to be reprimanded so harshly. So let's look at this, but we need to keep it in the context of its coming directly after the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? Directly after that parable. So we need to kind of have that parable in our minds as to maybe what this story means, though not a parable. As they were traveling along, he entered a certain village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Now Luke treats this as if we don't know who Mary and Martha and their brother Lazarus are. We know where they were. They would have been in Bethany, about maybe 2 or 4 miles, not far, but out of Jerusalem, 2 to 4 miles out of Jerusalem. And he knew these people. Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, he knew them very well. And so, but Luke's kind of introducing them into his gospel. And she had a sister called Mary, and who moreover was listening to the Lord's word, seated at his feet. So Jesus comes into their house. He is talking. He is teaching. Mary is listening at his feet. Martha is taking care of food, being a hostess, because presumably this isn't just Jesus. It's all of his apostles. So it's at least 13 men. Martha was distracted with all of her preparations, and she came up to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the serving alone? But tell her to help me. The Lord answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and bothered about so many things, but only a few things are necessary. Really only one, for Mary has chosen the good part, which shall not be taken away from her. Now, this has just come, Martha is trying to, I'm going to put this in modern parlance. She's got to make the coffee. She's trying to fix the sandwiches. She's trying to do all the things that a hostess would do. Surely they're probably excited. They're believers, undoubtedly. And Luke's gospel does not explain this, but they know. They know who the Lord is. And they've known him for quite some time. And I think that familiarity with Jesus is the main reason Martha feels so comfortable coming to Jesus in this way. I mean, one can imagine Jesus sitting. He is teaching, and the disciples are there. Mary is there. Perhaps even Lazarus was seated there as well. So, it's a group of at least about 15 people. And Martha just comes in and is a little frustrated and fed up with her sister, but so much so that she has no hesitation about interrupting the Lord. She has no hesitation about, there's the Lord of all creation teaching the secrets of theology and explaining the Old Testament. Excuse me, Jesus. I think we need to get Mary in here to help me in the kitchen. So that to me is not, that kind of boldness, presumptiveness on Martha's part can only come through familiarity. We know that Jesus knew Mary and Martha, that Lazarus was his good friend. He stayed with them in Bethany every night of Holy Week. And so these were longtime friends, probably friends that he had known all his life. We don't really know the origin of their connection, but he's connected. Maybe their parents and his parents had somehow been close friends, kind of really close friends. I also want to say this as a bit of an aside, if I might. There has been, and there's been for hundreds of years, this heresy. It's absolute false doctrine that Jesus was married to, maybe Mary Magdalene, who is often, a lot of scholars want to say that the Mary of Bethany is Mary Magdalene. And there's scholarly debate as to whether or not they were the same person. But there's been, the terrible film and book that it was based on, The Last Temptation of Christ, where Christ has a dream. The whole thing is kind of a dream sequence from the cross about he imagines what it would have been like to have been married to Mary Magdalene. You have more modern books and films like the Dan Brown series about crazy conspiracy theories, Kevin Smith's heretical, terrible film, Dogma, which is funny, but it's just blasphemy, and it's horrible. And so, that's how we disguise heresy, right? if you can get people to laugh at it, then it's somehow we aren't as offended by it. And when I say offended, let me say this. It is right to be offended by things that are wrong. Morally, theologically, spiritually. It is right to be offended. How we deal with that offense is the question. But when something morally or heretically or something that runs contrary to the faith, when something is blasphemous, it's right for us to say, hey, that's not right. Hey, wait a minute, I don't believe that. And then how we deal with that is the real question. So this whole, I hear this backlash. We live at a time when people get offended, and then, it's this whole media thing, and I've heard this backlash of, only weak snowflakes get offended by things. Learn to take a joke. Well, some jokes are offensive. And some comments, we live in a nation that allows for free speech, but just because speech is free doesn't make it right. And just because speech is free, it doesn't make it not vulgar or not untrue. Free speech is not true, necessarily. Free speech is not holy, necessarily. So, the ability to speak freely means that it becomes incumbent upon those of us who are concerned about truth and virtue and faith and theology, that we have to kind of sort through the myriad of information out there. And it is right and proper for us to be offended by things that directly contradict those things which we hold to believe as sacred. The question is then, how do we deal with being offended, right? Do we just throw a fit and a tantrum like a child, or do we stand up and say, actually, here's the problem. And Jesus Christ loves everyone, but here's the truth of Jesus Christ. So being offended is not a problem. We should be offended by that which is wrong. The question is, how then do we respond out of that offense, right? How do we deal with it? So, but Martha's familiarity with Jesus, I think this point should be made. Before Jesus begins his ministry, before he comes to be baptized by John, there is so much about Jesus' childhood and adolescence and his time in his 20s. We just don't know. And it may have been that Jesus considered at some point getting married. Before he maybe realized exactly who he is or the extent of his calling, he may have thought, why not? Even among the priests in Israel, celibacy was not a requirement for the priests of Israel. So, did he consider it? Maybe. It's complete conjecture. What I find here is that we presume Martha to be the older of the two sisters. And I would say that from this story and from their interaction in John 11 at the tomb of Lazarus, that Jesus actually has a much more collegial relationship, much more of a peer-to-peer relationship with Martha than he does with Mary. Mary kind of sits in awe of Jesus, like, oh, I'm going to sit and learn from the Master. Martha has no compunction about coming in there. Jesus, look at Mary. She treats him as a peer, right? This is the guy that she grew up with. This is the guy she's known for a long time. Jesus and Martha may have been a lot closer to the same age. And so, all this conjecture that Jesus may have been secretly married or whatever to Mary, I don't see any textual support for that. Mary revered the Lord, and he kind of treats her almost like a kid's sister or something, someone that he can instruct. Martha treats him like a guy, hey, we've known each other a long time here, Jesus. Good that you're here, but now, And so I think, if Jesus was gonna be married to anybody, you look at the relationship and the dialogue between Martha and Jesus, and that's much more. That is much more the type of dialogue you would expect from people who treat each other as equals, right? But to be clear, Jesus was not married to Martha or Mary. He was never married. He had no children. All of that is out and out heresy. And he is the Son of God. It is not his divine nature to marry and become a father. It runs completely contrary to his nature and identity as the Son. He finds his fulfillment in being the obedient Son of the Father, not in marriage and procreation in this world. Okay? It's just bad Trinitarian and bad Christology. Bad Trinitarian theology and bad Christology. But Martha comes to him and she is serving. Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the serving alone? Tell her to help me. Now, this is coming just on the heels of the Good Samaritan, which is obviously one of the most famous parables in all the Gospels about the importance of service. The Good Samaritan doesn't have a sermon. The Good Samaritan doesn't, the Good Samaritan acts, and his actions of service and help and rendering aid to someone in need, regardless of who they are, even at great personal expense, that is the message. And so we've just had this important parable about the importance of service. And here is Martha saying, why can't Mary help me serve? And so Jesus says, Martha, Martha, you are worried and bothered about so many things. But only a few things are necessary, really only one. For Mary has chosen the good part, which shall not be taken away from her. And that's the thing. I think it stands, this message stands almost as a little bit of a balance for the Good Samaritan, right? Taking care of our neighbors, serving them, meeting their physical needs is absolutely important and intrinsic to the message of Jesus. But that's not all of it. His words, the theology, the doctrines, all that of the church, that has to go hand in hand. And if you're too worried about serving and not worried about what Jesus is actually saying and teaching, it's not enough. You're missing it. You're missing it. So this is really about balance. What, for us as Methodists, Wesley would say it's about holiness of heart and life. It's about finding that balance between theology and action, about orthodoxy, right belief and right teaching, and orthopraxis, right practice or right doing, okay? And you have to have both. It is not enough to do right, you must believe right. It is not enough to believe correctly, you must do correctly, okay? Both of those things. And so, Mary and Martha here become kind of the point in case to say that Mary choosing to listen to Jesus and hear his words was even more important because Martha's distracted by so many, many things. And so why does Martha get this corrective? I mean, she's got a house full of these men. They're probably hungry because men are hungry. And, there's at least 13 of them, plus her brother, presumably Lazarus, so about 15 guys or so. and Mary's just out there and she's trying to serve. I think you got to think about some things. Does what Mary think that Jesus and the disciples need, is that actually what they need? I love to drink coffee. Most anybody who knows me knows that about me. And I started drinking coffee when I was about 20, maybe 21. And I was introduced to coffee by my great friend and mentor, Father Tim Murphy. And we were out at Camp Glen Mary, Camp Friendship. And out there at camp, boy, you had to, as my father would say, you had to howl with the wolves and then scream with the eagles. And we did. Boy, we were burning the candle at both ends. And me, as much as anybody, I would be up late, because often you had to wait till the kids went to bed, and then you just needed some time to decompress and visit with the other counselors who were also college kids, and just have that time to kind of visit with some of your own peers. It was very hot. It was Mississippi in June. And then you had to be up early before the kids. If you wanted to get a shower, if you wanted to kind of get your day going, you had to beat the kids up, get your shower, get dressed, get ready to go. And, that was something that was impressed on me by my dad, by my scoutmaster, by the Army. Never let the troops see you sleep. You put them to bed, you be up before them. They need to believe you are Superman. And so that's the way I did it. I mean, I would get about 3 hours of sleep out there at camp. And we run 3-4 weeks in a row like that. And even at 21, and I was in pretty decent physical shape, that wears on you. And so I remember one morning I wasn't just up and at 'em. And Father Tim took a long look at me and he said, "Son, I'm going to get you some coffee." And I was taking my shower. And all of a sudden, this hand with a mug came over the shower curtain with Father Tim on the other side going, "Oliver, drink this." And I said, "Father, I don't drink coffee." He said, "You do now." It's been a wonderful, wonderful journey ever since. But if you know me, you know I love coffee. And when I can remember in particular several times when I have gone to visit multiple parishioners in one day. And I'll tell this story in particular. We were in Florida serving a church, Sylvan Abbey United Methodist Church. Wonderful people. And Kate's grandparents were very, very sick. They were dying of cancer. And she had to go to Atlanta for Christmas to be with her grandparents. And I, of course, had to stay at the church and do Christmas Eve service at the church. And that meant that we were separated at Christmas. And I think we'd been married about 4 years at that point. And, Christmas is lonely without your spouse. And so the good people of my church, wonderful people that they were, on Christmas Eve, when they saw that I was there at the church alone, that Kate was not with me, Reverend Box, "Where's Kate?" She had to go to Atlanta. Her grandparents are ill. And so I'm here by myself. And they just reached out to me, one family, a friend of mine from seminary, Brandon Wise, and his wonderful family said, "Oliver, come on. I've known Brandon and his family for years. You come after church, be with our family for Christmas Eve. Just, don't be by yourself." And then Christmas Day, 3 of my church families, 3 of them said, "Reverend Box, please come to our house for Christmas." And so I had Christmas brunch at one house, at Nancy Sudbury's house. It was wonderful. And I had Christmas lunch at another house, and then I had afternoon Christmas, I don't know, snack, Christmas coffee, Christmas, I don't know what you'd call it. But I was all booked up Christmas. I mean, I couldn't even sleep in. I had to get up and get dressed and put on my red Christmas sweater and go visit people. And I was so thankful. I mean, you know, I'm a bit of an extrovert anyway, but having to spend Christmas Day by myself was just going to be the pits. So there I went, and went to visit my, and of course there were lots of other people there. You know, they were inviting me into their family gatherings, and there I saw all sorts of church members that day, which was great. And everywhere I went, the first thing, well, Merry Christmas, Reverend Box. Have a cup of coffee. And I'll tell you, that was great, because the first house I went to, boy, they never let my mug get low. I bet I drank 3 cups of coffee at that house. Then I went, stopped by the church to use the restroom, went to the next house, walked in, Merry Christmas, Reverend Box. Here's a cup of coffee. I had Christmas dinner, and it was wonderful. And I drank about 3 cups of coffee there. And then a couple hours, and I left. I went by the church to use the restroom, and then over to the third house. Merry Christmas, Reverend Box. Here's a cup of coffee. And they never let my cup get empty. And so I had about 3 or 4 cups. I drank about a pot of coffee that day. When I went to go home, I was just, you know, almost shaking. Don't get me wrong. It was, to my mind, though I missed Kate very much, and the separation was unfortunate but necessary, that stands out in my mind as one of my favorite Christmases. To be invited into their homes and to spend Christmas Day with my parishioners. It was like, you know, it was like the Christmas Carol when Ebenezer Scrooge wakes up and he goes, you know, he goes to visit his nephew's house, then he goes to Bob Cratchit's house, and he just spends the day going to visit people. That's kind of how I felt. It was a really wonderful day. But they all had the same thought. I think one of them gave me a wonderful present. I think the afternoon visit, they gave me a bag of Dunkin' Donuts, which is kind of my favorite coffee. They all wanted to serve me coffee. And of course that's the greatest intention in the world, but they didn't, and there was no reason for them to have done so, but they didn't think about, he probably had coffee at the last place. He may want something else. Now, I'm only saying that because I think Martha doesn't think about that with Jesus. Father Tim, my great friend and mentor, and it's difficult for me to fully express how much Father Tim has done for me in my life and in my spiritual growth. He performed my wedding. He has baptized both of my children. Though I have known and had the benefit of their ministry, several good ministers, Father Tim stands out as an amazing influence on my life and model of Christian ministry. But Father Tim is a bachelor. Of course he is. He's a Catholic priest, and he also was for a long time affiliated with an order called the Glen Mary Order. And that involved a vow of poverty. And Tim slept on, and I'm pretty sure this is still true, he slept on like a mattress on the floor. Like he didn't even have a bed. It was just like a mattress. It might have been stuffed with hay for all I know. This thing, just this old, it looked like a prison mattress. It was just this mattress on the floor. He had a few blankets on it, and that was his room, in his bedroom. And Tim was not a pretentious. I never saw him wear his collar except on Sundays, or if it was like a special occasion. He wore t-shirt, shorts. He wore Birkenstock sandals almost every day, which is partly why I wear flip-flops most days. He grew his beard. He had an old ball cap, and he was just authentic and real and genuine. And he lived out that calling. Tim didn't eat meat. He was a vegetarian. And Tim didn't eat a whole lot. He was pretty laid back. He was a bachelor. And so if you went to your house, most people, we all loved Father Tim. And so when he shows up at your house, you're like, oh, we gotta do something. We want it to be nice when Tim gets here. Tim would just roll in there. He'd be in there. You could offer him coffee out of a thermos, and he would think nothing of it and just say thank you. People would always want to fix food. And Tim was a vegetarian. He'd say, hey, peanut butter sandwich, that's great. It's good enough, no problem. He was not looking for, expecting, or needing anything pretentious. His favorite place to go, if we went out ever, would be to go to the Mexican restaurant, because they were all his parishioners. And so he would walk back in the kitchen and slap everybody on the back, and they'd all hug him, and because he had baptized all their kids, and he knew all of their names, and he loves those people. He loved being with his people. I think Jesus was the same way. And I have to admit that. I probably think that because that's how Tim was. And I think I came to understand Jesus best by watching Tim. He was an incredible mentor. So, I can't help but read about Jesus' life without thinking of Father Tim. But I don't think Jesus needed some formal, fancy meal for Martha to prepare for him and the disciples. When we look at the Last Supper, which Jesus is so concerned and wants to happen, he gets up when the meal is done and washes all their feet, strips down and washes their feet. It's not formality that Jesus is interested in. It's authenticity of the fellowship. It's the authenticity of the fellowship that Jesus wants to convey. His great gift to the church through a meal is bread and wine. It's very simple. Very simple. It's nothing. He does not say, yes, if I will be with you always in the beef Wellington. That is not it. That is not it for Jesus. Simple. He's not looking for formality. He is looking for authenticity in the fellowship. He's looking for love amongst his brothers and sisters. And he's perfectly fine for Mary to be there. He's perfectly fine for Mary to be there and sit up front. Perfectly inclusive. Let this woman be with us and sit here and be included in that. Jesus is perfectly fine with that. He is also more interested at the fact that what they're talking about instead of what they're being served. You could have thrown out Kool-Aid and cheese toast and Jesus would have probably been just fine. We just, heard the sermon last week about, we got 5 loaves and 2 fish, and Jesus is like, yep, that's fine. We'll feed thousands of people with that. So, I think Martha is more worried about how she looks, her reputation as a hostess, as opposed to what does Jesus really need? What does Jesus really want? And that's a question for us as the church. how we do church, what we do as a church? Is that more about how we look serving the Lord? Or are our priorities really focused on what does the Lord want? And what would the Lord have us do? So that's a good question. Because I think throughout the ages we have struggled. We have struggled as a church that we feel that we're doing things like Martha. And we have got to be more like Mary. We've got to be a little more laid back, a little bit more concerned with the authenticity of the fellowship than the formality of the meeting. Jesus is a humble man of a humble background, and he's more concerned with truth than doilies. He's more concerned with honesty than he is formality. So that's to bear in mind that. And I also think that the familiarity which with Martha treats the Lord blinds her to who the Lord really is. And that can be true of the church as well. When we spend so much time in the church, when we spend so much time hearing the stories of the gospel and hearing about Jesus, we can forget how important and who the man really was. I look at this picture. There he is. I see this beautiful window all the time. That is an artist's depiction of the Lord of all creation. Of the Lord of all creation. And so one day, when I stand before the Lord to be judged, I hope I am not so preposterously pretentious as to think I'm going to walk up and, well, good to see you, Jesus. Let me shake your hand. Who do I think I am? Get down on my face and be lucky if I'm allowed to kiss his feet. And I think there's a little bit of that. We talk, what a friend I have in Jesus, what a friend. Well, of course, but it's not a peerage. That's the way that the difference. Martha treats Jesus as a peer. He is a friend, most assuredly our best friend, but he's not a peer. He's not a peer. He's the Lord, the King, you understand. So that's something to bear in mind as well. Something to bear in mind as well. Maybe Mary had the same close relationship to Jesus as Martha did. Maybe they all knew him growing up. But Mary doesn't treat him that way. She treats him as her Lord. Martha tries to treat him as her peer. That doesn't work. And if he truly is the Lord, then he can tell us how he wants to be served. He doesn't need us to guess for him. Just a thought. Hope y'all have a great week. We love you. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.